Hello and a warm welcome back to the Pitchside podcast. I'm your host, the HRD, the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from the content on the channel, of course, and the Euro podcast coming soon. Of course, this is the final episode of the normal podcast of the season. And of course, follow us on social media. I'm at PSP on Twitter, PitchsidePod on Instagram, and help us reach the first K here on the channel before the Euros. Welcome to episode 168, the finale of the podcast. There is only one place we could start with and we could really talk about in this episode. It is the Champions League final yesterday, and to the victor goes the spoils. It is the Champions League final. Chelsea win the UEFA Champions League by beating City 1-0 in a final that was, I would say, more thrilling than it should have been, because, you know, at least the fans were there. You got a feeling of a pretty much a normal match, a normal football, normal occasion with the fans in the stadium and all of that. But definitely, again, the night belongs to Chelsea, and belongs, I think, more in particular towards Thomas Tuchel. Of course, we're going to get to the match itself in a minute, but let's praise Thomas Tuchel for a while and talk about his incredible achievements with the team, really turning things around with Chelsea in a way that probably nobody expected. I mean, yeah, surely people expected some sort of new manager bump, new manager sort of push with some big results and some good results for starters, but they didn't expect this transformation off the bat and really straight off. I think Thomas Tuchel, who was sacked off PSG, you know, really inexplicably, because, you know, the guy couldn't really handle a dressing room, who couldn't manage the sporting director in the club and all of that, and didn't have the power to do so. He went to Chelsea. He found a job that really suited for him, to be fair. A locker room that doesn't have that much of superstars, albeit they have very good players, but still there's not so much as big egos like there were in PSG and Neymar and Mbappe, so you could manage them easily, I would say, or easier in paper or in theory. Then you have him, of course, being able to apply his tactics, to suit his tactics to the club, to make the players understand his tactics, to make the players understand his plan, and understand his ambitions about the game itself. That is just, I think, bigger than anything you would expect. And also, I mean, the guy has, you know, terrific charisma, terrific excitement, terrific ambition about the game, and is really, really energetic about everything he does. He understands the game really well. You know, he's been in the final, so he's not unexperienced. He knows what he's doing. And, you know, he installed his plan, he made the players understand it, and he's playing to it to perfection. He really managed the game really well, and he outsmarted Guardiola for the third time, which is, I think, the most important thing you could say about this one. I mean, it's an incredible way for Thomas Tuchel to end the season, come midway through, really sort of on the back of a bad ending to his PSG stint, and then go all the way to win the Champions League in his second final in a row with a different team, and join an elite level, really, of managerial honours to win the Champions League. You know, with Chelsea, really, only him and Roberto Di Matteo now are in the club's history. Again, all the credit goes to him, and all the absolute plaudits go to him for transforming Chelsea from a team that was decent at the very best to a team that really, like he said in his first press conference back when he was appointed, a team that nobody wants to play against. And just like we talked about the victors and spoiled Thomas Tuchel, let's talk about the other coach. Let's talk about the other manager on the dugout, Pep Guardiola. I mean, this is another failure for him, another disappointment. He loses once again. He overthinks it once again, to put it mildly. He chooses the wrong lineup once again. He comes to the big occasion and overthinks it, overphilosophises the matters, and simply loses. I mean, you don't expect him to have any other result when he plays like that, when he chooses the wrong game plan and the wrong personnel to apply the game plan. I mean, it has been a trade for him in the last couple of years. I mean, but particularly with Man City. I mean, you could not say that a lot about, him at Bayern, albeit he did that against Barcelona in 2015, so it was quite the first example, kinda, of Guardiola overthinking things. Then you have, of course, the years with Man City, where he was eliminated from the quarters and from the round of 16 with ridiculous ways and against ridiculous opponents, really. I mean, eliminated against Lyon, against Monaco, against Tottenham, albeit underwhelming. Liverpool, maybe, probably the least expected version of Liverpool to eliminate City in the last couple of years. And then you have, of course, this one. At least this one he got to the final, so there's that, maybe for him. Maybe he'll try next season. This is the season where everything felt almost aligned for City at a certain point. The transformation they had in the middle of the season. And by the start of the season, nobody was thinking of them as Champions League winners, by the way. At a certain point, everybody was writing them off of this. And then they had a transformation in the league. They had this great run where they won 21, 22 in a row. And then they had this amazing run in the Champions League as well, albeit we could really question how good they were if they played big opponents from the round of 16 and on going forward, because they played Borussia Dortmund, who were middling for the most part of the season, and then they played Borussia Mönchengladbach, who, by that point of the season, where they played City, everything was down for them. Marco Rose was already heading to Dortmund by the time, and everything was going down for Borussia Mönchengladbach, so there wasn't really a test. The real test was against PSG, and mostly because PSG got lucky against Bayern, not because PSG were a strong team. And I think probably Guardiola, also missed a couple of, the first half in Paris and the first half in Manchester, where he really mismanaged the game for the most part, and then he fixed the mistakes. But again, this was different from anything he did. This was different from any kind of overthinking he did this season. This was absolutely horrible. Starting with Gundogan, starting with De Bruyne, starting with Bernardo Silva as your three in the middle is always wrong. It will always be wrong. And having no defensive cover against Conte and Jorginho, and against a pressing team the way that Chelsea presses. And the way that Chelsea press in, use four players in the middle to always press the players and always, close down on the passing options and all of that. When you're playing with no defensive option, no Rodri, no Fernandinho, that was wrong. You're spending the season really... you spend the season putting a game plan together. Spend the season with Rodri. Spend the season with Fernandinho there. You spend the season with Phil Foden being your starter and Riyad Mahrez. And you spend the season with Gabriel Jesus mostly being your starter and no Sterling. And in this game, you choose to not play Rodri, not play Fernandinho, not play Cancelo in the back as well. You spend the season cultivating him. Although... we can understand, we'll get to the match itself, maybe we'll understand it makes sense why you didn't play him. And then you have, of course, no Rodri and Fernandinho in the middle, so you really wanted yourself to lose, and you lost it in the first half. That is where you lost it, because once Chelsea got the lead, you know that 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get there, and you're really not going to get anywhere near the goal, because Chelsea, when they defend, under Thomas Tuchel this season, they defend really, really strongly, and they're really stiff at the back and the middle of the park. And the likes of N'Golo Kante and Jorginho always provide the cover. The way they set themselves up, the way they play, the way they press, the way they position themselves is so immaculate and so intelligent that it's hard for Guardiola to break it down. And Guardiola got outdone by Tuchel 3 times now. And, he can only blame himself. I really think he can only blame himself. We can debate whether he's one of the best in the world. We can debate whether he failed without Barcelona or not. But we cannot debate the fact that he overthought it. And he really mismanaged the game. And he did it in the worst, way possible, I would say. Now let's get to the game itself. We're talking about the match itself. The match wasn't that exciting. It was better than the last English final. Let's guarantee it that. Let's granted that at the very least. It wasn't one-sided. It wasn't that, big of a difference outside between the two sides. Unlike the last time we saw 2 English sides play in the Champions League final. But again, I think the biggest points of this game are tactical. It was a tactical battle of epic proportions, I would say. Tuchel played it right, choosing the right players, choosing the right options and the right game plan. While Guardiola, obviously as you mentioned before, didn't and chose the wrong plan and the wrong personnel for the most part. I mean, playing a high line with no defensive cover in the midfield, with Gundogan basically, Gundogan didn't make runs forward until the 63rd minute or whatever. Like he was startled with a job that he couldn't do, simply couldn't do. He was outdone by Jorginho and Conte all the way through in the middle. Every time he was pressed, he couldn't handle the ball really well. I mean, Man City had only a bit of a breather on the left-hand side of their attack on Raheem Sterling, who had a couple of one-on-one situations where he sort of had an advantage over Reece James, but then Reece James sort of recovered himself as the game went on and closed down really better. If he didn't have a recovery speed that good for him, I would say he wouldn't have escaped with it. And if it was a Spilicueta, I would say in that space instead of James, he would probably got beaten easily by Raheem Sterling's pace. But thankfully for Thomas Tuchel, he played Reece James there. Again, both sides were playing, sort of their game, but one side was playing their game in the right way, which is Chelsea, of course, playing their high line, with sort of squeezing themselves, trying to pull out the City players from their own high line, trying to play those diagonal switches pretty quickly. You're relying on the speed of Werner, who maybe will get a little bit slammed on Twitter and social media for his big chances that he missed in the first half, but still, I think he offered enough effort. He helped, the team enough to have his right to say that he was a big part in this win, because he moves a lot, he pulls the centre defenders of Man City, and I think this was no more evident than the goal itself, where Werner made the run, pulled Ruben Dias, and then left the space for Kai Havertz to move inside, pulling Zinchenko with him and leaving acres of space for Mason Mount to pick a pass. And what a pass that was, by the way. That was beautifully weighted from him. And of course Kai Havertz rounded around Edison and scored. And what a beautiful goal, by the way. What a beautiful time to score for Kai Havertz. First Champions League goal for him. And it doesn't get any bigger than a Champions League final. A player that was underwhelming for the most part of the season, COVID issues, lacking of fitness, lacking in form, dipping in and out. I think he hit his stride at the very best moment and the very best period, and it doesn't get any better than the Champions League final, as I mentioned. It was a big goal for him. Then Chelsea after that really sat in the back and defended. And they defended really, really well. You can see the charisma, you can see the sort of, guile and desire about them to defend, the heart that they had, the audacity that they had to defend really aggressively, not in a wrong way, albeit the Rudiger incident with De Bruyne that got him injured probably tells you otherwise, but they defended really wholeheartedly. They defended with all they can. All the players know what they were doing. Man City didn't create a lot of chances for them, more possession. They couldn't really penetrate. They couldn't break down Chelsea, particularly in the second half. Like you can say, by the time Guardiola realised his own mistake, they brought in Fernandinho. He brought in Aguero for Raheem Sterling. I mean, by the time he realised that, it was, I think, over. It was really over. He couldn't really make anything of the game. And, the time he made the mistakes, that was when Chelsea strike. That was when Chelsea took the game by the scruff of the neck. And by the time he fixed his mistakes, he couldn't really get the game back on track. Although he had a couple of occasions, not exactly big chances, but a couple of occasions where he could have done better, or where City could have done better and made the better decision. Edward Mendy wasn't forced to make any saves. Edison on the other side wasn't as well, but again, the difference is that Chelsea scored their chances while or the chance that they have properly, while Man City couldn't really turn around and couldn't really had a big opportunity to score because of the way Chelsea defended and the way positioned themselves to not let them penetrate, to not let them make their runs. And you add that to the fact that the positioning and the way that Man City players were moving wasn't exactly dynamic enough to break down Chelsea, to force them to pull possessions to open spaces. You don't see them. How many times, you can count how many times you saw Man City open spaces or carve spaces in Chelsea's defence, particularly in the second half, because in the first half they had a couple of situations where they were sort of in some space, particularly again on the left hand side where Reece James is, but in the second half there were none. Chelsea defended wholeheartedly. They really put their heart and soul in this game, and deservedly were winners of the game. Again, Thomas Tuchel, game plan to perfection. Guardiola, overthinking, using the wrong personnel, using the wrong game plan, and again, on the pitch, the individual performances as well were not that good. Sterling, again, we mentioned yesterday, he was not in good form, and he proved it yesterday. He didn't play really well. Riyad Mahrez was nowhere to be seen, and he was the player who got City to this point to begin with. I mean, he was the player he was the best player against Dortmund, I would say. In the second leg, he was the best player against PSG in both legs, and you end up him being basically disappearing in the final, and Ben Chilwell really not allowing him to have anything to do for mostly the whole game. Ben Chilwell, who didn't also venture forward a lot, and that proves, I think, his quality as a defender. And again, it was a pretty balanced situation with him and Cesar Azpilicueta, Reece James. I mean, shout out to Christensen as well, who played a decent game. After the injury of Thiago Silva, who was replaced by Christensen, he played for more than 60 minutes, and he was really, really good. And he really, took the place of someone like Thiago Silva brilliantly in the centre of the defence. Didn't have a lot to do, to be fair, for the most part, in the second half in particular, but, he was decent. Whenever the ball got to him, he defended really well. Rudiger was great as usual. Azpilicueta was great as usual. The whole Chelsea team, this is a team performance from Chelsea. I think summed up by the Conte statement later on, saying that we won this together and the result doesn't matter. The matter that we won this together and the team performance and all of that. It's absolutely brilliant. Shout out to him in particular, who bossed the middle of the park really well. And N'Golo Conte again proving himself as one of the best in his position and returning to his peak form. You could only wait to see him in France. I would absolutely love to see him battle it out against Kimmich in the middle of the park. It's going to be a tasty battle in the Euros. I mean, Kimmich and Goretzka and Kroos, him, Pogba. I mean, it's going to be a tremendous battle in the Euros. I'm really anticipating that. Again, overall, it was a collective effort. It was a real again, a team performance. A charisma, a heart and soul performance from Chelsea, a tour de force, I would say, in defending, and it really caps off a stellar second half of the season, let's say, mostly under Thomas Tuchel, playing Klopp, played Simeone, played Guardiola, played Zinedine Zidane, played Ancelotti, played Mourinho, and beat all of those. And that is just tremendous from a point of view of a man, again, who was sacked from PSG for bad results. I don't know what is the definition of good results for them at PSG. He won them the league. He got a Champions League final. He was close to winning. And then, of course, he goes and moves to Chelsea. And then, of course, PSG bring Pochettino in thinking that they're going to do the extra move. They don't. They lose the league. And they are eliminated from the semi-final of the Champions League, and Thomas Tuchel ends up winning it. That must be hurting. That must hurt in Paris, really, seeing someone like him winning the Champions League, and really, sticking it up to them pretty much. In the end, congratulations go all the way to Chelsea, really, at this victory. Finally, let's talk about a couple of general things really about Man City. I mean, and Chelsea, both of them. For Man City, this shouldn't be the end of the road, really. This shouldn't be the last time they try. They should be. I mean, maybe it would be a disappointment considering the amount of money they spent, which is the biggest factor, I think, in all of this. The effort that Guardiola put, the amount of disappointment, the expectations for them, every time they win the league, and every time they expected to win the Champions League, and particularly this season where it felt like this is the time where they got the most pragmatic, the most realistic about their games. Guardiola felt like the most mature of coaches and all of that. And in the end, it wasn't his night. It wasn't his day. Every dog has his day, as they say, and it wasn't Guardiola's day in the Champions League final. And again, this will open discussion about whether it was his own ideas that got Barcelona successful or Barcelona players got him successful. That debate will never be over, by the way, until the cows come home. And this is going to open a whole can of worms on him. And again, every time he fails in the Champions League, his reputation as a coach is questioned. That shouldn't be questioned, by the way, because he's a really great coach. He has his own brand, and he's really an innovative coach in football. But definitely, the disappointments, the failure after failure he gets in the Champions League, the way he gets eliminated at certain situations really harms his reputation. But it shouldn't be for a coach like him, and for his sort of stature in football, to reputation to be hurt by even this disappointment of a final shouldn't be enough to justify saying Guardiola is a bad coach. He's not one of the best coaches in the history of football, because that is completely wrong. On the other side, though, Chelsea, again, the epitome of working hard, I would say, not necessarily without money, because they spend a lot this season of it on Havertz, Ziyech, and Werner in particular, who would have been slaughtered had he missed those chances, and Chelsea ended up losing the Champions League final. He still probably would have been slaughtered on the social media, but definitely he needs to get more credit than he deserves. The whole team again improved on Thomas Tuchel. It was there was a big adrenaline shot from Thomas Tuchel to the players, who really feel like these warriors when you see them on the pitch, really playing completely deserving. Loads of players outstanding. Again, as I mentioned, Conte, I mentioned Havertz, I mentioned Werner already. I should mention Mason Mount. He's an unbelievable talent on the pitch, and he really deserves, I think, to be a starter in England for the Euros. He's an unbelievable player. He really, he's so mature above his age. Again, we say this, but probably this sentence is said a lot on a lot of players, but on Mason Mount it really applies a lot. He already has like more than 100 and something games with Chelsea already under his belt. Like, he's near maybe 150, and he's been relied upon by Lampard. He continues to be relied upon by Tuchel. He's his best player. He's an absolute workhorse, and he might not look that aggressive, or he might not look that sort of intense, but on the pitch he's an absolute machine. He is intense. He's not afraid to win the balls. He's not afraid to enter into duels with players and all of that. He's not afraid of anything. He's a tremendous talent, and again, he's one of those players that you look at and you say he's a generational talent. He's a player that deserves a place in the national team, and he's a player that has a future for the next decade or so as being probably one of the best in the world as well. He might be the next Frank Lampard as far as Chelsea are concerned. That's it for this episode, and that's it for the review of the Champions League final, where we close the season with, and that's it. We turn the page on the 2020-2021 season officially, and we go now into the Euros, hoping of a great competition as well, matching the hype that we expect for it. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the update from the content that we still be uploading over the period of the week that I'm going to be taking a break off before returning and talking about the Euro podcast, of course, previewing the groups, doing the squad rounds and all of that, and we're going to be heading, of course, towards the Euros on the 11th of June. Wait for us there, help us reach the 1st K here on the channel, and of course follow us on social media. I'm @PSP on Pitch Set Pod on Instagram, and until the next weekend, hopefully next Sunday, next Monday maybe, I will be seeing you soon. Keep us and keep updated for the content, and goodbye.